Now I'm actually kind of surprised that I have not done this one yet. I say that to mean that when pitting Kakashi and Jiraiya in a versus battle video, oftentimes there's only a couple of versions of this fight that really make it even worth talking about. Like, I think we can all agree that if Kakashi in his Anbu days were to go up against Jiraiya in his Sannin days, which in terms of feats and scaling is the earliest we can actually get any feats of Jiraiya, who is at worst just below Orochimaru in his Sannin days, would stomp Kakashi. I mean, we even see this in the Kakashi backstory filler arc. Granted, Kakashi was just starting out in Anbu, so that is important to consider, since Kakashi was in the Anbu for about 10 years, so he's lacking about 8 or 9 years of that battle experience in that encounter with Orochimaru. But still, even with that experience, I'd be hard pressed to say Kakashi would put up a fight against Sannin Jiraiya. And of course, following this, we would go on to do part 1 Kakashi versus Jiraiya, which, again, seems a bit obvious as to who would win this. Never mind the statements from both Orochimaru and Jiraiya about Kakashi being on the same level as Kabuto, which I would put Kakashi above Kabuto, but even still, if they're even remotely in the same ballpark, then it's not going to be enough to put Kakashi on the same level as Jiraiya. Like, Jiraiya has too much in his arsenal and too much chakra to draw from than Kakashi does here. Now, to be fair, Kakashi does have an arsenal of 1000 jutsu and can copy most, if not all, Jiraiya has in his arsenal, so long as it doesn't take up too much chakra, of course. But Jiraiya does have a bit more on-panel showings of jutsu under his belt, and again, more chakra to use. I mean, Kakashi's best chance here is to hopefully land a Raikiri on Jiraiya, which given Kakashi's battle IQ isn't totally out of the realm of possibility. Maybe with a strong enough genjutsu or something, he could create an opening to hit Jiraiya with Raikiri and secure a victory. Given Jiraiya's abilities and summons, I think even in base he's just a bit too much. Best case for Kakashi is that he's able to go toe-to-toe with the Jiraiya that was nerfed and fought against Orochimaru alongside Tsunade in the three-way deadlock. But even then, even Jiraiya being drugged and nerfed was still able to summon Gamabunta at one point, which will be a lot of trouble to deal with for Kakashi on its own. Speaking of which, in that deadlock, Kabuto went on to beat Tsunade and even did so at her own game, which is of course using medical ninjutsu. And if Kabuto and Kakashi are relative, and even more so if Kakashi is above Kabuto, maybe we can give Kakashi the benefit of the doubt and say he'd be able to give Jiraiya here a tougher fight than we gave him credit for. But that's also dependent on how serious you think Tsunade was taking the fight with Kabuto. Like, obviously she was fighting to kill he and Orochimaru, but you can make an argument that she didn't take him as seriously as she should have. And even said that Kabuto was much more precise and accurate than Tsunade was in her prime, which might help the case for Kakashi here even more so. But since this is a statement from part 1, you can take it with as much salt as you want. It's really just up to your interpretation. Now, the beginning of Shippuden to Hidan and Kakuzu fight Kakashi is where we see the gap between them start to come closer. Depending on how you want to interpret the differences between the manga and anime version of this fight, the second bell test at the beginning of Shippuden does showcase the improvement in Kakashi's chakra reserves and stamina as he fights the whole time while using his Sharingan, plus a few other jutsus that we do or don't see. Now, obviously the main thing that puts Kakashi in this ballpark with Jiraiya is Kamui. But again, obviously at this point, it's not as refined as it would be in later arcs. However, despite Kamui at this point not being as fast as it will eventually be, take away from the fact of how useful it can be here. As even though Kakashi wasn't able to take Datara's head off, the fact that Kakashi was able to Kamui his fake suicide bomb before it can reach his team, or Guy's team, which was closer, that's kind of crazy. And as a matter of fact, according to Kakashi, he was prepared to use Kamui on Kakuzu at the last minute as he was launching his giant fire style enhanced with wind style attack. If this is true, that makes the scale of what Kakashi's Kamui could warp away even greater, even by this point in the series, and potentially able to warp most of what Jiraiya has in his arsenal. Speaking of that fight with Hidan and Kakuzu, that's a fight that gets overlooked a bit. The fact that Kakashi was able to fight not only just against Hidan and Kakuzu, both of who are S-class ninja, but also 4 other elemental hearts that are all capable of flight and using high-level ninjutsu, according to Kakashi, while also pretty much babysitting 2 other Chunin. I'd say that's low-key one of the more impressive feats, at least for pre-War Art Kakashi. And that's all without mentioning the fact that Kakashi was able to speed blitz Kakuzu before either Hidan or Kakuzu could note it. Kakuzu even admitted that he couldn't even sense Kakashi's approach, which implies this never happens to him, or at the very least, it rarely happens. Now, I've seen some people actually misinterpret that moment and say something along the lines of, well, Kakuzu let himself get hit with Raikiri in order to bait Kakashi, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Like, why would Kakuzu want to run the risk of getting one or any of his hearts taken out? Especially not his Earth-style heart, which allows him to use the Diamond Morph jutsu. Besides, right after Shikamaru destroyed Kakuzu's second heart, Kakuzu immediately went into his transformation to try to end the fight right there, implying he was starting to get a little bit worried that he might lose any more. So yeah, him trying to bait Kakashi in order to hit his heart to draw him out makes no sense. I think it's more likely that Kakashi just managed to sneak up on him and blitz him, especially again given Kakuzu's surprise. Now, having said all that, when it comes to this Kakashi versus Jiraiya, I think it'd be an uphill fight for Kakashi still. And now, I don't want to sound like a Dragon Ball scaler right now and say that because this person can beat that person, that means that that person can beat the other person. But I'd feel comfortable in saying that Jiraiya himself could beat Hidan and Kakuzu together at the same time, and do so relatively easily. Maybe a little bit more difficult if Jiraiya has little to no intel going in, but even then, I'd still say Jiraiya has it. And even though Kakashi would have likely secured the W at the end of their fight with Kakuzu using Kamui, there's no telling how bad of a condition Kakashi would have been in after that. After all, he was fighting for a while, used a good bit of jutsu, such as multiple water walls, shadow clone, headhunter jutsu, primary lotus, and including 6 Raikiris in total, all while using the Sharingan. At the very least, if he had to use Kamui, he might have still had one more in the chamber before he passes out completely or just kicks the bucket. And if Hidan had been there too, he would have likely still had to fight Hidan and probably done so alone, whether due to Ino or Choji not being too useful or Kakashi not wanting to risk them dying. Now, within the context of this Kakashi versus Jiraiya, Kakashi's best chance is to land Kamui right off the bat, and I mean before Jiraiya can summon Gamabunta. Because the second he's out on the field, it's game over. Best case for Kakashi is that he has to use Kamui to get Gamabunta out of the fight. And let's be generous to Kakashi and say that Kamui at this point could warp away something as big as Gamabunta. This still would leave Kakashi in a not so great condition, as this would lead Kakashi to fight Jiraiya himself, plus any other medium-sized toes that Jiraiya decides to summon, or even Ma and Pa too. This is all without mentioning Sage Mode, which with Kakashi being in the condition he would be in post Kamui Snipe would likely give time for Jiraiya to enter Sage Mode if he felt like he really needed to. So with this one, I'd say Jiraiya also wins this one pretty comfortably, like, 7, 8, or more out of 10 times. Now, I'm going to skip Pain Arc Kakashi versus Jiraiya for now, and go in the reverse order and work my way back, starting with Hokage Kakashi. Now, I know this fight kinda, sorta, but not really happened in the filler episode of Boruto, and of course I'm referring to Kakashi versus Koji. Now, if we go by the novel, then with his strength being increased by orders of magnitude, his speed being at bare minimum on the level of the Raikage, his new jutsus, including various forms of purple lightning that can be used offensively and defensively, his fire style water mist jutsu, which is a giant flaming bird that is strong enough to overpower Sage's 6-pass water style ninja tool, and Kakashi's chakra reserves and stamina being much more impressive than they were in the War Arc. This puts his scaling at best to be a Hashirama tier fighter, and at worst the level of KCM2 Minato. With Koji, there's not too much to go off of here except for his tussle with Jigen, and even though that fight didn't last too long, it's still pretty impressive given his opponent. This one's tough, but if we went straight by the scaling here, Koji would edge out Kakashi just a bit if he uses Sage Mode. Base Koji and Kakashi is a lot more even, and I think it could go either way. And as much as I would love to go into more detail about that, the problem here is that when it comes to these two, each have different types of sources to draw from. For Koji, we have the anime and the manga, which, given the scene / fight we have to scale in from, can only be really up to interpretation as it leaves it a bit more ambiguous. Whereas for Kakashi, the novels take the time to go into detail about how much more powerful he is. Now, if we had seen or had a story where Kakashi goes toe-to-toe with Jigen or someone around his level, it'd be easier to cover this fight with Koji depending on how much better or worse Kakashi would have done. But unfortunately, we just don't have that available, so my best guess, Kakashi versus Sage Mode Koji. Koji wins like 7 out of 10 times. But Kakashi versus base Koji could go either way. Now, moving on to DMS Kakashi, and I really don't think we have to go too far into this. DMS Kakashi stomps either Jiraiya or Koji within the time limit. I think we can safely move on. Now we can go on to War Kakashi versus Jiraiya. Now, at first, I thought this was obvious, but depending on the version of War Kakashi that we use, this could be closer. Now, since we're going in the reverse order here, we'll start with late War Kakashi, and just for clarity, this is War Kakashi with 1 Sharingan in case that wasn't clear. I'll use Jiraiya that's already in Sage Mode to start the fight, as I know the conversation of if Jiraiya can get into Sage Mode will come up. Now, to be honest, I think the aspect that is going to determine a big majority of this fight and how it plays out is speed. And when it comes to speed, we have more feats for Kakashi here in both physical travel speed and the speed of his combo. I don't think I need to go super into detail about this topic, as I'm sure most of y'all already know what those feats are by now, but in a nutshell, Kakashi's Kamui is anywhere from on the level of KCM 1 Naruto to 8th Gate Guy, even when losing his sight. And when it comes to travel speed, the best we can get for Kakashi is at the speed of KCM 2 Minato. Now, when it comes to the speed of Sage Jiraiya, the best we can get for him is at the speed of either the human path or the Preta path. Not too sure there's like a massive difference in speed between the 6 paths, since they're all linked together through a field of vision. But the Preta path specifically was able to intercept a Rasen Shuriken being thrown by Sage Naruto, which would be faster than Sage Naruto himself. Now, having Jiraiya as fast as the Preta path can be arguable, since when he tried to blitz him with the giant Rasengan, the Preta path was able to react in time and absorb it. So if we wanted to be generous to Jiraiya and say that his speed is on the same level as each of the paths individually, then this could put him on the same level as Kakashi in the Pain arc when using the Raikiri, as the Oscar path was able to come in off-screen, off-panel when it was beaten into the ground by either Choji or Choza and intercept the Raikiri from Kakashi at the last second in order to save the Diva path. But then we also have a scene that kind of contradicts this, and that's when the Oscar path was able to sneak up on Jiraiya while in Sage mode, speak a whole sentence to him, and not only attack him, but also take his arm. But then earlier in the same fight, we also see that Jiraiya was able to speed blitz the animal path. But then in that same fight, we see he fails to blitz that same path during a sneak attack. So like I said, it is tricky, but if we are being generous and fair to Jiraiya, I think at best, we can get him on the same level of speed as each of the paths of Pain, excluding the Diva path, who was able to tussle with and even outrun Six Tails Naruto. And if that's the case, Jiraiya has nothing much on his own that is going to be capable of catching Kakashi lacking in terms of speed and reaction time. And in terms of size and power, there's also nothing in Jiraiya's arsenal that Kakashi can't warp away. If we either go by the scene where he was about to warp away the Ghetto Monster's head, or the implication that Kakashi was going to warp 1 to 5 Biju bombs being charged by the Biju, this means that both of Jiraiya's biggest attacks, the Giant Rasengan and Gamabunta, are fair game to be taken off the field with Kamui, which brings me to the subject of Frog Song, and by extension, Ma and Pa. Well, I mean, they'd be here anyway since they need to be there for Jiraiya to enter Sage mode, but you know what I'm saying. This will provide much more trouble on Kakashi then, especially with Frog Song. Like, I'm gonna be real, if Kakashi gets caught in it, he's done. Even if we give Kakashi the benefit of the doubt and say he'd be able to break out of it somehow, I think by the time he does, Jiraiya with Ma and Pa should be able to land a solid enough attack, especially if they all attack at the same time, to end the fight. I mean, Sage Jiraiya, as well as Lord Fukusaku's strength, is either rivaling or reaching into the level of strength as Tsunade, who would only need at least like 3 hits max to end Kakashi. So yeah, if they all attack at once while Kakashi is in the Genjutsu, he's done for. I mean, maybe that's downplaying Kakashi because he was taking hits from the B2 Jinchuriki under Obito's control, so maybe it might take a bit more for the Toad team to take the win, but not a substantial amount. This one's interesting, but I think for the most part, I give this one to Kakashi like 7 or 8 out of 10 times. Like, I know some people might think I'm sleeping on Sage Jiraiya here, but to be honest, even with Ma and Pa there, they might not pose much of a threat as you might think. Especially if Kakashi can just instantly warp things much faster and larger than them, like a KCM2 Naruto clone, and even things that are small and fast as a Rasengan being carried by KCM1 Naruto. And since Kakashi has anywhere from 5 to 7 shots of Kamui in the chamber, that alone gives him all he needs to take out anything Jiraiya brings out. Now, I will say that if Kakashi is caught with Frog Song, he's more than likely done for. But there's also a chance that as soon as they're in midair, ready to launch Frog Song, that Kakashi could use Kamui quick enough to get both Ma and Pa off the field right then and there. To make this more interesting and fair, let's keep going in the reverse order and use early war Kakashi, as in the one that fought against Zabuza and Haku and the rest of the 7 ninja swordsmen. This is interesting because this Kakashi didn't use Kamui up until he got to the battlefield with B and Naruto against Obito. He used this Kakashi, then he's restricted from using Kamui and can only use his arsenal of 1000 jutsu to fight Jiraiya. Sage mode Jiraiya, this would actually be very tough for Kakashi, because without Kamui, he doesn't have much to contend with all of Sage Jiraiya, Ma and Pa, and or Gamabunta at the same time. So under those circumstances, I'd say Jiraiya would hold the edge, albeit high difficulty. And I say that because if it's just Sage mode Jiraiya, for example, I still think Kakashi would contest with him and possibly even take the win even without Kamui. Because although he's restricted from using it, this Kakashi isn't far from the Kakashi that was going toe-to-toe with and tanking multiple V2 Jinchuriki alongside 6th Gate Guy. So even though he can't use Kamui, his reaction time speed and his travel speed doesn't change. So there is a really good chance that Kakashi with his arsenal, as well as being able to copy most of what Jiraiya has in his own arsenal, and actually being able to use them now thanks to his chakra reserves being more extensive, along with his high intellect and strategic skills, that Kakashi could at the very least hold out until Jiraiya runs out of Sage mode. But again, this is a hypothetical Sage Jiraiya without Mangekyō, as he would normally need them in order to enter Sage. So War Kakashi without Kamui versus Sage Jiraiya, I think Sage Jiraiya would win like 7 out of 10 times. But if this is base Jiraiya versus War Kakashi with no Kamui, I actually think this is probably the most even fight in the whole video, as at this point it would be all just straight elemental jutsu and IQ going head to head. And since these two would at this point have about the same amount of chakra, give or take, this fight could last for a while. I would say this fight is about 50-50 up until one of two things happen. Either A, Jiraiya summons Gamabunta, or B, Kakashi is able to catch Jiraiya off guard with a strategic move before he can summon Gamabunta. Both of which I could see happening. Kakashi might be done for if Jiraiya is able to get Gamabunta on the field, unless we say that Kakashi can copy or already has something in his arsenal like Dark Swamp to hinder him. And conversely, with Kakashi having a higher strategic battle IQ and still having the speed edge here, I can also see it just as likely that he can beat Jiraiya before he gets the summoning jutsu off. So this one's actually pretty tough, and again, I think it's the closest one in the video by far. But overall, I give this one to Kakashi like 6 out of 10 times. Moving on to the last round, Pain Arc Kakashi versus Jiraiya. And yes, just in case y'all are wondering, I am going to combine Kage Summon Kakashi with Pain Arc Kakashi for this one. I know Kakashi in the Kage Summon is a bit stronger after getting a mental amp through reuniting with his father, but compared to Pain Arc Kakashi to War Arc Kakashi, the gap in overall ability isn't nearly as vast. And so personally, I believe Kage Summon Kakashi and Pain Arc Kakashi are roughly the same person. So to save time, we'll just combine them here. And now I'm not going to go into the spew about who did better against Pain than the other, as that's a different conversation and I think it's going to be just a waste of time. Suffice it to say that each did about as well as the other given each character's respective circumstances. Now I think Pain Arc Kakashi gets a bad rap even despite his circumstances, and that's partly due to how many, or rather how few jutsu he was chucking out. And the amount of jutsu he pulls out in this fight completely contradicts the amount he pulled out in his previous fight with Hidan and Kakuzu. Again, in that fight, he used about 6 Raikiri, 1 Shadow Clone, 1 Substitution, 2 to 3 Water Walls, Headhunter Jutsu, and the Primary Lotus. And that was all before potentially having to use Kamui at the end of the fight. And also, the way he talks to Sakura about it in the ramen shop after, he implies that he would have been put in the hospital but not dead. So it's possible he still would have had enough chakra for one more Kamui as a last resort. So in total, he has anywhere from about 14 to 15 jutsus, give or take, most of which are high level ninjutsu that take a vast amount of chakra on their own, which tells me that that lightning style shadow clone he used against Pain takes a stupid amount of chakra. And I know Kakashi literally said this during that fight, that it took about half his chakra, but given that he only had enough chakra to use the Headhunter Jutsu, Raikiri, and 2 Kamui, and then die after, I don't think we really can comprehend how much chakra that clone took up. So if he's capable of using that many jutsu without resorting to the lightning clone, which would be in character here as he only relies on that in order to gauge the abilities of an enemy, which Kakashi would more than likely know a good bit of knowledge on Jiraiya's abilities here, then Kakashi has plenty of jutsu in the chamber to give Jiraiya a good fight. And before anyone says it, yes, Jiraiya also would have a pretty good amount of intel on Kakashi too. I only brought that up to explain why potentially Kakashi won't have to rely on the lightning clone too much so he can have more chakra. All that said, if we start with Sage Jiraiya, Kakashi better use Kamui from the jump. And I mean, given that Kakashi was able to warp Sasuke's Susanoo arrow at point blank range, which the arrow is faster than Sasuke himself, who was able to react to the Raikage with just his base Sharingan, if Jiraiya decides to just speed blitz Kakashi head on, he's getting Kamui for sure. But I can't see Jiraiya being that reckless, and even if we say he is, I doubt Ma and Pa will let him do something like that stupid. Not saying it's still not possible for Kakashi to land Kamui, but in character he's going to be using that as a last resort, as even if he uses it once, he'll be straggling a bit for at least a couple minutes. And as a matter of fact, I think it's safe to say he'd be more like his Hidan and Kakuzu counterpart and save Kamui until the end. And here's what I will say, is that if Jiraiya brings out Gamabunta and has Ma and Pa there with them, he's going to have to reuse Kamui for one of the two. Like, yes, he could still use Kamui on Jiraiya, and if Ma and Pa are on his shoulders, they're gone too. But he'd still have Gamabunta to contest with, and with the condition that Kakashi's going to be in after using one Kamui, I'd be hard-pressed to say Gamabunta would lose to Kakashi here. Unless Kakashi can buy time using Headhunter Jutsu or whatever, but that's about it. Conversely, if Kakashi uses Kamui on Gamabunta, he would still have to contest with Jiraiya in Sage Mode plus Monpa, and in the condition he's going to be in after using one Kamui, yeah, Fog Song's definitely going to catch him for sure. So I think with this one, Jiraiya has his definitive edge, probably like 8 out of 10 times. And I think this one is very similar to the War Kakashi versus Jiraiya without Kamui, and say that Pain Arc Kakashi versus Base Jiraiya is closer. With Jiraiya not having Sage Mode or Monpa, definitely a lot more easier for Kamui to be landed. And if he does so immediately, then hey, yeah, he wins. And since this Jiraiya will be slower than Sage Mode Jiraiya, Kakashi has a lot more liberties to land Kamui. But again, if Jiraiya is somehow able to get Gamabunta on the field in enough time, Kakashi will still have to resort to using Kamui on either Jiraiya or Gamabunta. And the same situation will likely happen. But I will say, given Kakashi's arsenal and his capability at this point, I would say he's reaching into that Sannin level of a fighter, and I think Kakashi would give Jiraiya a heck of a lot of trouble here, especially if we go in character and say that Jiraiya wouldn't resort to using Summoning Jutsu right off the bat, and Kakashi also wouldn't resort to using Kamui until the end. Then again, it'll be just like the War Arc Kakashi versus Jiraiya without Kamui, just a whole bunch of elemental jutsu and high IQ going back and forth until somebody gives in. But again, the second Jiraiya summons Gamabunta, it's a wrap. So with this one, I'd probably say a 50-50, and I can't really give an answer to this one. But for this one, I'd say 50-50, and I want you guys to answer this last one. Who do you think wins between Pain Arc Kakashi or Base Jiraiya? I hope you all did enjoy the video. Let me know what other videos you want me to cover. Like I said, I'm back doing more Naruto videos this time around. I hope you all stay tuned for the next one. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click the bell for more notifications. And until my next one, like and snow, out.